So if I were an advisor in Washington, yes, I would be saying to all kinds of people, be very, very cautious about your investment because you could be sitting on a disaster.
Any U.S. warplane flying over a Syrian government-controlled area could now be shot down by Russia.
Well, what's going to happen is this is going to continue. Some stocks in America are turning into a bubble. The bubble's going to come, then it's going to collapse. And you should be very worried. The
average length of time for a downturn to occur between one downturn and the next is 4 to 7 years. Okay, we'll do the math. The last major downturn we had, 2008, 2009, 4 to 7 years means we're kind of due for one. So long as the hype is believed, they have to participate in it to make the money. The trick is to get out before the reverse begins to happen. And when that happens, when the foreigners or the domestics who begin to get frightened about Mr. Trump not delivering, well, then you could see that kind of withdrawal become a spiral, a self-reinforcing spiral, and then you see the kind of literal collapse that we had, for example, in the last 4 months of 2008, when the stock market just went into a complete tailspin and trillions were lost in a matter of weeks.
U.S. pilots flying over Syria now on the lookout for Russian airplanes or missile threats following the weekend shootdown by a U.S. Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet of a Syrian warplane. This because the Kremlin threatened that any U.S. warplane operating in certain areas of Syria would be considered a threat.
The U.S. decided to send its B-52 bombers to Europe. They went to join NATO drills and to patrol the seas bordering Russia.
NATO was created as a Cold War instrument to fight against the Soviet Union and the so-called Warsaw Pact, neither of which exists now, but NATO still does. This raises the question, why? And there is only one answer. Whatever else anyone says, it's an instrument of US foreign policy. The US asks its allies to increase military spending and at the same time says that NATO is not intending to attack anyone. But if you are not attacking anyone, why would you increase military spending?
Well, what's going to happen is this is going to continue. Some stocks in America are turning into a bubble. The bubble's going to come, then it's going to collapse. And you should be very worried.
So when is this going to happen?
Later this year or next.
Later this year or next.
Write it down. Later this year or next.
Later this year or next.
Write it down.
And what will trigger it?
Well, it's interesting because these things always start where we're not looking. It could be some country we're not watching. It could be all sorts of things. It could be war.
How big a crash could we be looking at?
It's going to be the worst in your lifetime.
This year, our nuclear forces will receive more than 40 intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of penetrating all existing missile defenses, even the most advanced.
The U.S. has sent ships and planes very near the islands, sometimes drawing Chinese warnings.
This is the Chinese Navy. This is the Chinese Navy. Please go away quickly.
Tonight, a government-run Chinese newspaper is warning of a possible war with the U.S. over the man-made islands. It's spurred by this comment from Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson at his confirmation hearings.
We're going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building stops, and second, your access to those islands is also not going to be allowed.
The Chinese newspaper says, quote, unless Washington plans to wage a large-scale war in the South China Sea, then trying to block China's access to the islands would be, quote, foolish. And Tillerson had better bone up on nuclear power strategies if he wants to force a big nuclear power to withdraw from its own territories.
America has military ties with almost everyone in the region, effectively surrounding Beijing with pro-US forces.
On grand display in the Chinese capital, new weapons, which U.S. officials believe are designed specifically to target U.S. military assets. A new ballistic missile with the range to strike the U.S. naval base at Guam, earning it the nickname the Guam Killer. A new anti-ship ballistic missile, which analysts call the Carrier Killer, unveiled today for the first time. And high above, a flyover by China's new J-15 fighter, soon to be deployed on China's own new aircraft carrier, its first. All this today watched not just by China's elite, but Russian President Vladimir Putin. A Chinese company produced this video showing a Chinese attack on forces very much resembling American ones, with an overwhelming Chinese victory.